will be my grave without a name, that earth may swallow up my shame.
Let it begin.
Are we not men? No, we are not men. We are beasts, and you have made us beasts. We will not walk, we will not talk, we will not gather in the night. We will dress right, dress ready, run. And as a last resort, we will use cold blue steel and jab between the second and third ribs and twist. Ah! Bushmasters! 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The 2.7 million people who wear our country's uniform, active, guard, and reserve, comprise the finest military in the history of the world. They stand ready to face down any threat, anytime, anywhere.
In the summer of 2005, I saw a documentary that was broadcast on the BBC. It had been made in Canada by Sarah Goodman and been funded by a Canadian broadcast company. It won Best Documentary. Quite frankly, the people that put this film together deserve more than just a Best Documentary prize. They deserve the Nobel Peace Prize, because this movie, its original title is Build Me Up, Build Me Down, showed in the aftermath of 9/11 that the Pentagon were basically taking in recruits, basically their children, and brainwashing them in these army camps and turning them into ill-equipped, immature killing machines.
Lopez, stop. Lopez, stop now. Did you say something, Lopez?
Now, at one point in this film, we see a sign saying infantry, and of course infant is a child. And we hear on the soundtrack this whole group of trainees shouting, "I want to kill somebody." How does that fit in with democracy? How is it democratic to use taxpayers' money to train children to shout at the tops of their voices, "I want to kill somebody"? That's not democratic. If they shout, "I want to defend somebody," yes, that's democratic. But "I want to kill somebody," that is demonic. Well, if you want to search for the Antichrist, I suggest you start at the Pentagon. Now, if you look at a satanic pentagram, every Masonic lodge and every church of Satan somewhere in the building has a 5-pointed satanic pentagram. And if you look at the satanic pentagram, in the center of the pentagram, you see a pentagon. And the Pentagon building itself is a grandiose piece of occult architecture. And the United States, and indeed many cities around the world, are full of occult buildings. The Pentagon is orientated towards the north. This, traditionally in magic terms, is the point on the compass where the god of war, or the spirits of war, are invoked, at the north point of the compass. If you look at an aerial picture of the Pentagon, you'll see that it's a pentagon, inside a pentagon, inside a pentagon, inside a pentagon. And this is symbolic of the way secret societies set themselves up with an outer circle of members, and then you have the inner circle, and then you have the inner core. Washington, D.C. is a fascinating place to explore once you've learnt the signs and all the symbols of Freemasonry and satanic groups such as the OTO. What Washington, D.C. is fashioned after an Egyptian necropolis. And an Egyptian necropolis in the ancient era of Egypt, the Pharaonic dynasty of Egypt. An Egyptian necropolis is a temple for the dead. And what Washington, D.C. is a modern version of an ancient Egyptian temple for the dead, but this is now a temple of death. And if you want to look for satanic inspired architecture, look no further than the Washington Monument. It's proportioned after the giant obelisks of Egypt, and its height above ground is 555 feet. But it's anchored, obviously, into the ground just over 100 feet deep. The foundation runs 111 feet, about 20% of the height of the overall building above ground. If you add 20% onto 555, you end up with 666. The Washington Monument is 666 feet in totality. The other aspects of Washington DC are typically Masonic. The small roads within the parklands surrounding the White House have been exposed by David Icke and many other authors as making up the shape of an owl, which is the symbol of Bohemian Grove in California, Bohemian Club. An owl sitting on the top of a pyramid, and of course the pyramid is one of the symbols that was used by the Bavarian Illuminati. And the whole of Washington DC is this modern temple for death. And the death management center is the Pentagon.
The Book of Revelation warns of an age of destruction, where planet Earth will be writhing in pain like a mother giving birth. The Book of Revelation prophesies the birth of the Antichrist, who will emerge to wield great political power across the planet. The plan of the Antichrist is very simple: famine, plague, war, total annihilation of all living creatures. There will not be just one Antichrist. The ancient texts of Islam warn us that the Antichrist, as foretold in the Quran, in which the Antichrist is called the Dajjal, will be assisted by many minor Antichrists. These minor Antichrists, or Dajjals, herald the era of the great Dajjal, the supreme Antichrist, the premier son of Satan, who will spread terror in the name of peace. Still, to this day, it is unclear who exactly wrote the Holy Bible. But in the Bible texts, we see that the Antichrist will seek to kill the coming second Messiah. This will be done, apparently, by mass killings of children around the world. Famine, pestilence, plague, and war will be used to kill thousands of children each day. In actual fact, before our very eyes, every day 26,000 children die from starvation and preventable diseases such as the common cold. Politicians are advancing a global plan, the plan of the Antichrist. This is the doctrine of Lucifer, which Freemasons, Knights Templar, and members of the Illuminati global network of secret societies follow. Their goal is the total spiritual and ecological destruction of the world. They use advanced technology to spy on and kill whoever gets in their way. The Illuminati is a global network of witch covens, black magicians, and Freemasons. They use a secret code of numbers and words to communicate the plan to one another. They hold rituals right in the heart of the British Parliament and Washington, D.C. The Illuminati have designed the United States as the headquarters for their barbarous plan to bring about the apocalyptic prophecies of the Antichrist. This film is the true story of the Luciferian elite, the true history of the ancient Illuminati, who have created a global fascist dictatorship. This is the true plan of those who serve the Antichrist. Once you have learnt the techniques used by the Illuminati-controlled media and understood the significance of their rituals, you will have the power to stop the Antichrist conspiracy.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go wild.
I'm sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322. Before we go, you and George Bush were both members of Skull and Bones, the secret society at Yale. The rule is, if someone mentions Skull and Bones, you walk out of the room. If you're both in a both in a presidential debate, and the moderator says Skull and Bones, do you both leave the podiums?
I doubt it.
You'll hang in there.
I think you'll see both of us have a terrific... You know, I'd love to have a debate with the president right now.
If this were a dictatorship, it'd be a heck of a lot easier. Just so long as I'm the dictator, 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 I'm the dictator.
This evilarchy does exist. And that the eye on the pyramid is the eye not only of Horus, but the eye of Lucifer. And if you take a look at the symbology in London, you take a look at the Illuminati Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas, you take a look at structures all over the world, they have told us what they are doing. They have identified themselves. We are identifying the enemy. We have identified the enemy.
symbols are used by Masonic lodges, witch covens, Satanists and alchemists to directly access parts of the brain which respond to strong shapes and colours. Just as the saying goes, a picture paints 1,000 words, so magical symbols can be used to convey a multi-layered message or command. The use of symbols to convey the desire or will of the magician is generally referred to as sigil magic. To make a magical sigil, you first write down your desire or spell. You then remove all vowels and all repeating consonant letters. You then rearrange the remaining letters into an easily remembered symbol. This symbol, or sigil, contains the original spell. Sigils are often found in company logos. Every time you watch television, visit the supermarket, or walk the street, your subconscious is bombarded with sigils. In fact, you are living in one giant sigil.
Resigned. I will not be pushed, filed, stamped, indexed, briefed, debriefed, or numbered. My life is my own. My life is my own. What do you want? My life is my own. Information. We want information. Who's on? That would be telling information. You won't get it. I am not a number. I am a free man. I am a free man. Free man.
Manly P. Hall was a high-ranking Freemason who wrote The Secret Teachings of All Ages. He states that the radiation symbol is a Masonic sigil used in accepted rite Freemasonry, which represents the success of our combined plan for world domination. Magical symbols, or sigils, can also be conveyed using hand signals. In her book, Transformation of America, author Kathy O'Brien claims that she was the victim of a mind control program run by the CIA. She claims that George Bush Sr. used ancient magical hand signals to directly control her subconscious mind. She also claims that Bill Clinton was under mind control. In covertly recorded off-air transmissions from the Bush-Clinton presidential election campaign in the 1990s, we can see that Bill Clinton was nothing more than a puppet to the puppet masters which placed him in the White House. Bill Clinton's demeanor seems to be similar to a person who is under a hypnotic trance.
I love you. Can we do any more? We'll do some more. We'll do some more. I'll do some more fun. Talk. We've done all talk all today.
Lampe, Missouri was a place where I heard George Bush and Bill Clinton talking. From the point of view I had, they certainly were friends, and they didn't recognize any party lines between them. That's something for the, a smoke and mirrors illusion for the public. It's not something they adhere to because they had exactly the same agenda, and that was for bringing in this New World Order. I heard George Bush talking at that time. He was talking to Bill Clinton, and I've since photographically recorded it and wrote it verbatim in our book, that when the American people became disillusioned with Republicans leading them into the New World Order, that Bill Clinton, as a Democrat, was going to be put into the office of president. This was decided in 1984. Actually, I'd heard about it even prior to that, but that, as of 1984, they were already discussing it as an absolute fact.
So I wanted to finish the thought here. That's the one break we have to hit live. It's been around the world, but it's hard to believe we're being watched in 151 countries. Crazy. Ted Turner changed the world. He's a big fan of yours. He would serve you, Captain. I'm really surprised. Miss Rebbe, what's he got left in life? After you're elected, think about it. No dope. That's for sure. Great guy to work for, too.
Remember that every single man, woman, and child in the state of South Carolina awakens to a freer, safer world because of George Bush. I would remind people that every single morning we all awaken to a safer, freer world because of George Bush. And Nicole, I would remind you and the people of Florence that all of us awaken every single day to a freer, safer world because of George Bush. They themselves awaken every single day to a freer, safer world because of George Bush.
Moscow is in the midst of the last hours of summer.
Brainwashing, hypnosis, and even surgical manipulation of the human brain has all been researched thoroughly by the CIA.
To provide an objective record of a subject's behavior, she's filmed before treatment and again after treatment, and the two films placed side by side. Notice how the subject before treatment, in the picture on the right, holds onto the chair as she moves. Notice the difference in posture, the greater effort required to rise from the chair, the longer time needed to complete the simple task.
He would cut the skin, take the skin flap back, roll it back. He would then literally remove the skull, the top part of the skull. The patient all this time is under a local anesthetic, completely conscious.
From my own point of view, the most unexpected finding was to discover that a mild electrical current applied to the surface of the brain causes a patient to have a memory from his own past sometimes.
Good. Make it 1 volt, please. 1 volt. Yeah. This is 1 volt.
I heard what sounded like an orchestra playing, and I asked the nurse where it was coming from. And she said, "What music?" And I said, "Well, that music." And then it stopped.
Then I stimulated it again, you remember, and asked you about it, and you hummed it. Will you hum it now? You remember it?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Da 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 da.
The Soviet secret police and their offspring in Eastern Europe and China have presented the world with a series of public trials at which prisoners, including some Americans, calmly and apparently without coercion made confessions of unbelievable crimes, espionage, sabotage, treason. To Western observers, these confessions have been so bewildering that a belief has grown that the communists have perfected some mysterious, irresistible technique for manipulating human behavior.
Мы пионеры, юные ленинцы. По-ленински жить и трудиться – наша большая мечта.
V obchodních domech Prior z nepřeberné nabídky zboží našeho trhu se vám zatočí hlava.
Wendig. Schnell. Ausdauernd und robust. Ihr zuverlässiger Begleiter, der neue Trabant 601.
Durch den sich bei ihr im Laufe der Jahre immer extremer herausbildenden Hang zum luxuriösen Leben nach westlichem Vorbild wurde ihre ideologische Grundposition später immer mehr aufgeweicht.
Было все на белом свете, люди издавна повторяются. Было, есть и снова будет так.
Будет так, будет так, будет так, будет так. Было, есть и снова будет так.
Будет так.
Будет так.
Будет так.
Будет так.
Было, есть и снова будет так.
If you sat around a table and you said, right, what we need to do is we need to find some way of getting young people to see the world the way we want them to see it, so that by the time they become adults, they are completely following the reality we want them to believe in. Someone might say, well, they might not have it but you know the ideal thing? What we do is we have a system where we take children away from their parents at least 5 days a week, all day, from about the age of 4 and 5, and we have control of their minds until they're about 17, 18. That would be ideal. Well, of course, that's what happens. It's called the education system.
Yes.
And it's indoctrination. The whole system, because we have two hemispheres of the brain, the left brain, which is about words and this world reality and, you know, the perception of this reality. We have the right brain, which is where you get creativity, inspiration, and connection, and then you've got this corpus callosum, which connects the two. First of all, we use a fraction of our brains. Why is that? And the other thing is that what the system does is it turns out left brain prisoners. They run the system. And it does it by putting information through schools and colleges and universities into the left brain, which it then says at time of an exam, give me all that back, and if you tell me what I've told you well enough to believe, then you'll pass the exam and you'll be very successful. Anyone that takes that information into the right brain and puts their spin on it, or questions it, or sees through it, and puts that in the exam, they are perceived as a disruptive influence in the classroom.
Yes, they are.
And so what happens is, for you to become a doctor, overwhelmingly a politician, a journalist, someone often in industry, all these areas that control the system.
The professions.
The professions.
Yeah.
Lawyers.
Yes.
I mean, on and on we go. You have to have gone through your young life constantly taking information into your left brain and regurgitating it out on exam papers. To become a teacher, you have to go through that process. Then you go through teacher training college, where you're taught how to do it to others, and then you're let loose on the children. Yes. The whole system is run by left brain prisoners. And if you look at the school system, things like music and art that stimulate this side of the brain, the uniqueness, they are constantly cut back in favor of left brain curriculums. And this is systematic. I have to get this over to people. This is not systematic at the level of, you know, people who administer it into reality. It is coldly calculated in the shadowy areas where these concepts first come from.
Yeah.
And they know what they're doing.
Yeah, these examinations, what's happening is that, you know, to fit in, to be part of the so-called in crowd, you have to reconfirm the beliefs of the hierarchy.
Exactly.
The ancient kingdom of Tibet, situated high in the Himalaya mountains. Tibet is a culture based on compassion, totally at odds with the doctrine of the Antichrist. The spiritual and secular leader of Tibet, His Royal Highness, the Dalai Lama, won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989 for his continued policy of non-violent resistance of the communist Chinese government, who illegally took control of Tibet more than 40 years ago. Tibet is being systematically destroyed by America's most favored nation, Communist China. Buddhist monks are being slaughtered, and there is wholesale torture of nuns and monks who defy the Chinese military and follow the pacifist, anti-war teachings of the ascended Buddhist masters.
My brother-in-law and I were arrested together and marched around in front of our village. Then the Chinese shot him in the head, and his blood splattered all over me. The Chinese said, "So you call for His Holiness the Dalai Lama and call on America for help. But where are they? Will anyone help you? If you obey China, your path will be smooth. If you don't, watch what happens to these two."
The Tibetan people are suffering immeasurably under the Chinese. Countless beatings and killings. And though the Chinese say there is freedom of religion, they don't allow us to practice our faith.
Tera dongja dangsen hyo dijole kyangre do. Kyangse dongja dangju kona kangelele cha dende cha ge yorwal. Ande kanje ji de dedo. Tanda tija ngombu chayo.
cha de ban de lo de yo man ni za le gyo do si de ni na za shu jo le si a. Do ba. Do ba la. De la do de. Za de le gyo da yo. Do la. Ante. Za de de ma do ju se de ma yo. Zai go le ja wa shu re.
Yo.
Ko kan de na ge do.
Ko be zu ko na zu den de.
Ja wa shu de ka je jo.
Ja wa shu de 마랑 비 수고 차서 마랑 비 마랑 비신 이 샤라 여러분 샤라 til에 경자 당분한 이 샤진 가시게 겨워 미 시여 메다다냐 본들이 시지 한 지레야 겨워 시지 지 나가 로균야도 지레야 자리 타고 딘데 본부딘데 두도 겨신 미숨 서다 쉬어 한 진네디 봐 지야 수고 가서 로당지 즉 세면하나야 세면다 진짜 접전당서 열어 봐. 저거다 진짜 규칙이 숨어서 좀 다행이다.
sepre gyöl bachi ta dolla tsarre ben shi yore ete kosa yore tu seble le jete seble se de ke chaba shirare seble le jete na nasal pendo yore tege beti be do a wa be da be shi bo ku ma da o de le rang de me do sha da me do hai sa zai che me sa shu a Zalanjan tu ye yomare. Ine kali le shula mechi kuma. Kirang de son ta go chen shu. Kirang yu tanda mare, he ji be tanda la. Du song da re, che ji re. Ya gu shi da re yongwa. Sam lu le chen shu, da ya a ka ine de ba kyu re. Lo le bu chen shu, le ke nang mare.
The Free Tibet campaign is a worldwide movement of volunteers who wish to highlight the illegal killings and imprisonment of Tibetan people.
Free Tibet!
The Free Tibet campaign displayed flags during the state visit of the Chinese Premier in London. The Free Tibet flags were confiscated by British police officers. The peaceful protesters were often arrested and dragged away for no apparent reason. Some were even assaulted and beaten by British police officers.
I'm not young, haven't got long hair in dreadlocks, and I'm not covered in rings all over the show. I've always felt strongly about Tibet and about what's going on in China on the political front. The fact that they've still got detainees in prison who were at Tiananmen Square 10 or 11 years ago. That is bloody awful, and something has to be done. And I think in a case like this where the government won't do anything, it's always down to the people to do something instead.
Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Tibet!
The police officers carrying out these illegal arrests are mostly members of Freemasonry. Freemasonry is more than just a secret society. Freemasonry is actually a religion. Freemasons pray to a tri-pantheon god, one facet of which is the warmongering Baal deity. Freemasonry is the most popular occult religion amongst police officers, judges, and barristers, such as Mr. Tony Blair. The spiritual master and head of state in Tibet is the Dalai Lama, who has written many excellent books promoting the benefits of meditation and compassion. Even though the Dalai Lama is a man of peace, he speaks good English and is recognized for his statesmanship. He was refused an audience with Queen Elizabeth of Great Britain. However, the British royal family, who have members that are active Freemasons, greeted the leader of the murdering communist Chinese government with a full state ceremony. Clements Kuby and Mike Lemley are two filmmakers who have made excellent documentaries about the tyrannical genocide in Tibet. It is clear from these films that Kurt Weidemann of the Washington State Department utterly denies the evidence of genocide against Tibet.
Official U.S. policy has consistently regarded Tibet as a part of China, although an autonomous region within China.
My crime was that in 1959, I signed a statement saying that Tibet was an independent country. For that, I spent 17 years in Chinese prisons and concentration camps.
We have no evidence at this point that the Chinese government is engaged in any policy or in any actions aimed at wiping out the Tibetans or, in short, reflecting a policy of genocide either against the Tibetan people themselves or against their culture.
I mean, Tibetans are no longer wearing Tibetan clothes. Tibetans not talking Tibetan. All the Chinese wear Chinese. It is a blue uniform, everybody. And the monasteries are no longer is a monastery. And no monks are there.
They used to have mobile clinics which would go from village to village and just get the women together and get them sterilized. Or even women who were pregnant in their 9th month were made to abort their children.
At one point in this interview, we see that his mind control programming breaks down.
What about self-determination for Tibetans?
On the BBC Newsnight programme, we see a Chinese government minister also displaying signs of heavy mind control.
Can you explain to us on the political situation why there has been no response from your government to the Dalai Lama's proposal in Strasbourg of nearly 3 years ago now about an arrangement between him and fellow Tibetans and your government?
In 1988 in Strasbourg, the Dalai Lama proposed to make Tibet a democratic political entity governed by itself, which maintains relations of alliance with China. And what does it mean?
Well, it's suggesting, he's suggesting that they be given autonomy in internal affairs, that they give to you
I just
control.
Quote what he said in his proposal. It's nothing new. We think it's nothing new, but another version of the statement that China holds only suzerainty, not sovereignty over Tibet. We heard of this kind of clamoring at the beginning of this century in order to divide China. That phrase also means that the Dalai Lama advocates Tibetan independence. And we have repeatedly said that China's sovereignty over Tibet can never be denied. Neither independence nor semi-independence or disguised independence will be tolerated. Thirdly, the Dalai Lama's proposal favored transforming Tibet into a peace zone or a buffer state among the great powers through demilitarization or neutrality. But a peace zone or neutral zone involves the problem of state sovereignty and international safeguards. So it is out of the question for a country to establish in one of its regions a peace zone or a neutral zone with its neighbors.
Hawati en tawi, tem jefa kau, ta pen em awef, mu f, ta f, sem f, minute f nebet.
Get on with it. Say what you have to say.
When the Jews return to Zion, and a comet rips the sky, and the Holy Roman Empire rises, then you and I must die. From the eternal sea he rises, creating armies on either shore, turning man against his brother, till man exists no more. Book of Revelations predicted it all.
I'm not here to listen to a sermon.
It is by means of a human personality entirely in his possession that Satan will wage his last formidable offense.
It said that my
Go
wife
to
was...
the town of Megiddo, in the old city of Jezreel. There see the old man Bugenhagen. He alone can describe how the child must die.
Look here.
He who will not be saved by the lamb will be torn by the beast.
Will you stop?
Your son, Mr. Thorne, the son of the devil. He will kill the unborn child. Then he will kill your wife. And when he is certain to inherit all that is yours, then, Mr. Thorne, he will kill you.
That's enough.
And with your wealth and power, he will establish his counterfeit kingdom here on earth, receiving his power directly from Satan.
You're insane.
He must die, Mr. Thorne. Go to the city of Megiddo. See Bugenhagen before it's too late. You see me in hell, Mr. Thorne. There we will share out our sentence.
The Kabbalah is a collection of Jewish magical texts which were given to mankind via psychic communion with a fallen angel called Raziel. Raziel is one of a pantheon of so-called fallen angels who serve the light-bringer Lucifer. The Kabbalah describes the many angels and demons who inhabit the spiritual realm. The Kabbalah gives Kabbalists a roadmap called the Tree of Life, which explains how to invoke and communicate with these powerful spirits. The magical information in the Kabbalah originates from Babylon and ancient Egypt at the time of the pharaohs, but did not reach Europe in printed form until the 11th and 12th centuries. The sacred books of the Kabbalah are just a few thousand words long, but they contain complex descriptions of a spherical Earth, parallel universes, and the atomic nature of matter, ideas which have become common doctrine amongst modern physicists and astronomers. How could such complex information be contained in a group of ancient texts barely larger than an average magazine? The answer is that the Kabbalah is written in code. Codes are used to conceal multi-layered complex information which would later be studied by medieval alchemists. Sir Isaac Newton and many leading scientists studied the rich occult sciences within the Kabbalah. There was a time when mysticism, religion, alchemy, astronomy, and astrology were studied as one Kabbalistically based tradition. Jewish physicist Albert Einstein conveyed pages and pages of complex calculations in a simple 5-symbol code. E equals mc squared. Modern-day quantum physics, chaos theory, and the notion of parallel universes can all be traced back to the original texts of the ancient Kabbalah. The higher secrets of the Kabbalah included instructions on how to kill a person with just one look. This is called the evil eye. The magical name for the evil eye is En-ha-Ra. In a wax cylinder recording made in 1921, we can hear British black magician and part-time espionage agent Aleister Crowley invoking the fallen demon angel Raziel and En-Ra-Ha, the evil eye. Since medieval times, the Jewish people have been considered a race of magicians. The biblical rabbis used shaman-type techniques to induce altered states of consciousness. Fasting, flagellation, and burying oneself up to the neck were all techniques used to prepare the rabbi-magician for a battle through the 7 portals of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, where they would eventually meet the supreme deity in a realm called the Merkaba. Ritual sex magic was also practiced amongst some Jewish cults. Many temples had holes in the walls so that rabbis could ritually sodomize a prostitute, a young man or a boy, and invoke the fallen angel Raziel as they reached sexual climax. The word sodomy is derived from the name of the biblical city of Sodom, in which sex magic and also blood sacrifice were widely practiced. A strange version of vampirism, or blood drinking, is still practiced to this day by many rabbis who suck the blood from the freshly severed foreskin of newborn babies. Much of the ritual we see in the modern-day Catholic Church, such as the symbolic eating the flesh of Christ and the symbolic drinking of his blood, are derived from ancient Jewish rituals in which different forms of vampirism and blood sacrifice were an accepted part of this occult tradition. After all, the Pope does wear a Jewish yarmulke. The collection of texts called the Kabbalah were eventually transcribed by Rabbi Isaac the Blind in Provence in the south of France during the 12th century. For the first time in its 6,000-year history, the ancient magical techniques of invoking fallen demonic angels and killing someone using the evil eye were put down on paper. The Kabbalistic writings of Isaac the Blind fell into the hands of a group of 9 French noblemen. These noblemen became known as the Knights Templar. The word cabal, meaning a group who conspire together, comes from the word Kabbalah. One such cabal, who were to later inspire a whole armada of black magic cults and Freemasonry, were the so-called Knights Templar. They laughingly called themselves the Poor Knights of Christ, but these men were far from poor. They deliberately styled themselves as monks so that they could go about their Luciferian Kabbalistic studies and conduct business without being taxed nor arouse suspicion from the Vatican. The Kabbalistic higher secrets of ritual sodomy, the evil eye, chanting incantations, necromancy, blood sacrifice, and invoking the fallen angels in service to Lucifer fascinated the French Knights Templar. They realized that the Kabbalah originated in Palestine, and once they had realized that the Kabbalah was the key to untold spiritual magical power, they cunningly planned a bloody crusade to Palestine in order to search for more Kabbalistic and magical artifacts. They eventually discovered and looted the Temple of Solomon. Solomon was a biblical magician king who is accredited with inspiring large parts of the corpus of works we now know as the Kabbalah. The Knights Templar arrived in Palestine with one main goal: to stop the Muslims from gaining any knowledge about the Kabbalah. Historical Islamic oral accounts from the 12th century testify to a sickening crusade of plunder, torture, murder, and sexual depravity. The Knights Templar, once they had discovered the magical teachings of the Kabbalah, were dedicated utterly to destroying its origins so that they might hold its secrets exclusively. Archaeologists have found ample evidence of tunnels constructed by the Templars in Jerusalem. They are widely believed to have found and brought back to Europe the fabled Holy Grail. The so-called Holy Grail is actually a set of higher magical teachings. It is not an object, but a piece of information. Utterly Kabbalistic in its origin, the Holy Grail is the highest Kabbalistic secret. That is, that physical matter can be transformed molecule by molecule by the use of incantations of ancient Hebrew letters and numbers, and that the nature of reality is really an illusion.
When I said publicly in 1991 that the Earth was a living entity that we could communicate with and could communicate with us, people just dubbed me crazy. And now we're seeing scientists who have studied this coming to the same conclusion.
Yes.
The bottom line is this: everything is conscious. What we call creation is like an ocean of infinite energy, which is manifesting itself in different forms. It's like we may perceive ourselves as droplets, if you like, individuals. But if you put a droplet in the ocean, where does the droplet end and the ocean start? The ocean is the droplet is the ocean, and it's the same with us. You may look as you do, I may look as I do, that wall may look as it does, but they're all expressions of the same energy field, manifesting in different ways. So, of course, the planet itself is a living, thinking, emotional entity, and we are interacting with that energy field. And one of the things the Illuminati have set out to do and are trying ever more to do in the period we're experiencing now is to bring the vibrational state of the Earth's field, the Earth's consciousness, to as low a point as they can. Because we, as human beings, are living in that energy field. And it's very simple. If you affect the sea, you affect that which lives in the sea. And so the more that they can lower the vibrational state of the planet, the more it becomes, if you like, treacle-like density. The more we living in that energy field are pulled into that state. When you have the wars and the environmental destruction and all these things that cause tremendous negative emotional energy, then you are lowering the vibrational state of the planet, you're lowering the vibrational state of the people, and you're basically holding them in a vibrational prison, which makes it much more difficult, not impossible, but much more difficult for them to hold connection out into the infinite beyond, where they can be in this world, but not of it in terms of their perspective of reality. If you disconnect people and hold them in this density, hold them in this illusory reality, they are in this world and they are also of it. And therefore, the only information that they have to get a fix on how they see life themselves and reality in general is through the eyes and the ears. And who controls that? The Illuminati control that through what we laughingly call the education system, the mainstream media across the planet. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to disconnect us from multidimensional infinity so that we don't see the world from that perspective, and therefore see through the illusion and see through the nonsense and see through the lies. And then once they've disconnected people, they then program this lower level of our consciousness with a reality that suits them. And this is why people who have had a different perspective on life, a different perspective on reality, who have held that connection to some extent out into the infinite, and have expressed that view, expressed that vision of reality and possibility here, they're the ones that are dubbed crazy, lunatics, and dangerous. Why? Not because they are, but because from the point of consciousness that they are perceiving this world, to people who are here, the vast majority, that is just crazy. I mean, if you said to people, is that table solid? They say, of course it is. Well, it isn't. It can't be. It's made of atoms, right? And atoms are not solid. Tell me how it does that. Our minds do that by turning vibrational fields into apparently physical objects. The denser the vibration, the slower the vibration, the more dense that we decode that into what appears to be a physical object. And so someone who's out there and can perceive that sees the world in a completely different way, and because it's different to the norm and the mass norm, which is programmed into people from cradle to grave, they're just isolated and called crazy. When in fact, you know, they're the people we need to listen to.
Yeah, I remember Stanley Messenger. He said to me once that there are no objects, there are no things. Everything that, like for example the wooden table, everything is an event, because once that was a tree, and in years to come that will be thrown away into a skip and it'll end up decomposing somewhere. We don't perceive that as an event because it's happening on a slow scale, but there are no things, there are only events.
Well, that table was once a tree, and when it was a tree, it was an illusion. Now it's a different kind of illusion, and when it's thrown on the scrap heap and goes back to energy as it decomposes, then it will still be an illusion. And this is for me, if you're talking about how we're controlled, how the few control the many, if you can suppress the information that people receive in terms of what is possible, you to the same rate suppress their perception of what is possible. Okay, now once you have accepted that what we're told is possible is how it is, then you're living in a box that big. So anyone that starts to talk about things that are beyond that perception of possibility, you immediately dismiss them as crazy. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. A few centuries ago, when people said the Earth was a sphere, they were perceived as crazy and dangerous. And one of the reasons was that if you lived on the bottom of a ball, you would fall off, right? Now, once you introduce the law of gravity, what appears at first sight to be a nonsensical idea becomes perfectly logical. However, if you suppress at that time knowledge of the law of gravity, then people are going to dismiss the truth because they can't perceive that the truth can be possible. And when you're talking about entities that shapeshift, that appear and disappear, UFOs that appear and disappear, if you program the population to believe that this world is all there is, that this is a solid world of solid individual objects, then the idea of things appearing and disappearing or shape-shifting from one state to another, to that sense of perception, is totally ludicrous. But once you introduce the suppressed knowledge, which is that this world is not solid, and what we're living in is basically symbolically a radio station, in terms of all the radio and television stations broadcasting to this place now are all existing in the space that I'm sitting in. I can't see them. They are not aware of each other unless they're really close on the dial, because they're on different frequencies. And if I'm on or something else is on a different frequency, a seriously different frequency to that wall, then I can walk through it, or something else can walk through it. Just as if I turn my radio on now, I tune into a radio frequency broadcast that's coming through this wall or this window. And so this reality that we think is so solid and all that there is actually like a radio station. And this physical body, this holographic illusion, locks us in, tunes us in like a radio to this radio station, to this reality.
After 200 years of Kabbalistic magic and bloodthirsty crusades, wantonly murdering children, women, and engaging in ritualized sodomy, the French Knights Templar were rounded up, tortured, and executed. Many confessions told of the Knights Templar monks ritually sodomizing each other, invoking evil spirits, and implanting these spirits into animals such as cats. Various black magic artifacts were confiscated from castles owned by the Knights Templar, including silver caskets containing desiccated heads and skulls. The Knights Templar referred to these heads as Baphomets. They were placed at the center of a round table. Templars would then conduct a séance invoking the spirit of Lucifer to speak through the head. The most damning information exposed them as antichrists. Several Knights Templar confessed that the image of Jesus was spat upon and trampled during Kabbalistic rituals, a satanic tradition which is still practiced to this day at lodges of the Ordo Templi Orientis, which was once headed by Aleister Crowley. Many Knights Templar bribed their way out of prison and escaped to Scotland and the Mediterranean island of Malta. They first renamed themselves the Sovereign Knights of Malta, and then, after establishing trade routes to North America long before Christopher Columbus, they re-emerged in Scotland, calling themselves Freemasons. All versions of Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, the Skull and Bones, the Palladian Rite of Freemasonry, Co-Masonry, Scottish Rite Masonry, the Ku Klux Klan, and Crowley's Ordo Templi Orientis are derived from the original Kabbalistic rituals of the Knights Templar. The Kabbalistic banishing ritual of the pentagram was in part performed by Queen Elizabeth II during her coronation ceremony in 1952. The ritual was based on the lesser banishing of the pentagram ritual designed by Aleister Crowley for the Golden Dawn secret society.
There comes now yet another ancient ceremony. The great officers of state, and the bishops, and the nobles who have borne the swords, the scepters, and other regalia, move to the steps of the throne, which stands upon its dais. This throne, like the raised floor of the theatre itself, is descended from those days 1,500 years ago, when the early kings sat for their crowning upon a mound of earth. So today, the Queen will ascend the steps of her throne, there symbolically to be lifted into it by the Archbishop and the Earl Marshal, in the sight today of a great multitude of people. It is at the moment that she is seated upon her throne that she takes possession of her kingdom.
During the 1930s and 1940s, the OTO Lodge in California was headed by a brilliant young rocket designer called Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons developed patented rocket technology, which is still in use by NASA to this day. NASA named a crater on the dark side of the moon in honor of Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons worked during the day to develop rocket propulsion systems which would serve NASA's space program, which was controlled by ex-Nazi SS officers such as Werner von Braun, who had been brought to the USA by the CIA's Project Paperclip. At night, Jack Parsons would hold sex magic rituals in his house in Pasadena and initiate fellow scientists at the Los Alamos Atomic Bomb Laboratory. Jack Parsons was fully aware of what his rocket designs would eventually be used for. Not far from Jack Parsons' rocket lab in Pasadena, Robert Oppenheimer was building the world's first atom bomb, which would be exploded at Los Alamos, near a place called the Road of Death, which lies on the 33rd degree parallel. Once installed as the head of the OTO's American operation, Jack Parsons conducted a giant satanic ritual, aided by a fellow OTO member with the codename Freighter H. In 1948, the same year that George Bush Sr. was baptized as Magog, Jack Parsons undertook one of the most dark rituals known to Kabbalists, the Babylon working. This ritual requires the initiate to visualize the Kabbalistic tree of life, with its 10 spheres and 22 connecting pathways. Between the top 3 spheres and the lower 7 spheres, there is the so-called abyss, the place where one's personality, possibly even one's sanity, is potentially destroyed. If the initiate successfully spans the abyss with personality intact, then he becomes a black brother of the Kabbalah, a black magician of the so-called left-hand path. In the tradition of Judaic mysticism, these black magicians are utter evil and are in themselves pestilence. This giant Babylon working ritual saw Parsons, aided by his magical protege, Freighter H, project their astral bodies into the dark abyss of Lucifer. 1948 saw George Bush Sr. baptized in the name of Magog, the spirit who would lead the army of demons against Christ at the apocalypse of Armageddon. That same year, Jack Parsons baptized himself as Belerion Armilas al-Dajjal, the Antichrist. Parsons took on the ancient Judaic teaching that Christ and his church were the enemy of civilization, and that they had to be destroyed. On a 40-day pilgrimage in the Mojave Desert, the place where Area 51 now resides, Parsons summoned forth Babylon, the Scarlet Woman, the whore of the apocalypse, the consort of the great beast, Satan 666. According to the mysterious Freighter H, during the ritual he saw Parsons rip a hole in space-time, and something evil flew in. So who was the mysterious Freighter H? None other than the author and inventor of the new cult religion of Scientology, Mr. L. Ron Hubbard. Former initiate of Aleister Crowley's OTO, Hubbard wrote a so-called sacred text called Dianetics, which now has an inspired following of evangelical millionaires in Hollywood, just as the Kabbalah training schools are now brim full of people who had their interest in these Judaic magical techniques inspired by Britney Spears and Madonna. Jack Parsons had a sex magic partner in the OTO named Marjorie Cameron. Whilst staying with her friend Renata Drux in Hollywood, Marjorie Cameron confessed that she had been part of the Babylon working ritual. She said that it had been devised by Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard, Aleister Crowley and Manhattan Project scientists based at the Los Alamos Atomic Bomb Research Unit, headed by Jewish scientist Robert Oppenheimer. Marjorie Cameron confessed that during the Babylon working ritual, assisted by L. Ron Hubbard, Jack Parsons had sexually impregnated her at the point when the spirit of the Antichrist was bestowed upon him. Cameron Parsons had been made pregnant with the child of the Antichrist. They were breeding what the Kabbalah describes as a golem, or a golem.
Oh, you are sick.
A golem is an artificially created humanoid, usually made from dead human body parts, which is animated by the magician chanting incantations and mantras. These magical voice sounds are what Kabbalists call twilight language. Isaac Bashevis Singer, winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature, once wrote, "The Kabbalah teaches that dead matter is not really dead, but can be brought to life as a golem by chanting mantras. The Talmud speaks of Rabbi Rava, who had the power to create golems. We are living in an epoch of golem makers right now." In the horrific film Rosemary's Baby, directed by Roman Polanski, A satanic cult in New York, led by a character based on Aleister Crowley, summoned forth Satan to impregnate a young girl and breed an Antichrist golem child. Notice that Satan's body is partly reptilian. Interestingly, the devil in Rosemary's Baby is played by none other than Anton LaVey, founder of the American Church of Satan. Jack Parsons told his former master that the fetus of the golem was later extracted from the womb of Cameron Parsons by government agents who delivered the fetus to a special team at the Manhattan Project atomic bomb facility.
And if you take a look at what Alex Jones is doing on video, a friend of mine who's got a talk show in America, he's going out into places like the Bohemian Grove.
Six years ago, American broadcaster Alex Jones and his cameraman Mike Hansen infiltrated Bohemian Grove, a gigantic private forest owned by the Bohemian Club of San Francisco. For 130 years, the Bohemian Club has been holding rituals for 2 weeks each summer in a private 2,000-acre redwood forest.
There was a surprising development in the summer of 2005. A Bohemian Grove employee decided to videotape some of the activities in the Grove and to give us the footage. The footage you're seeing was shot on a tiny digital camera, so the quality isn't the best, but the images are powerful. The individual that gave us this footage asked that we not release their name. Our source was able to confirm what we had seen in internal Bohemian Grove documents and annals, that the elite of the elite attend the Grove. The Grove's own internal annals brag that the Manhattan Project, or the plan to create the A-bomb, was hatched inside this building, known as the Chalet. The Strategic Defense Initiative, better known as Star Wars, was also the brainchild of Grove members, and was born inside the Chalet. Our source worked at the Grove in the summer of 2004 and the summer of 2005, and he was able to obtain 2 program covers for the cremation of care ceremony, as well as a 2005 membership list, which reads like a who's who of U.S. and European elite. Former President Jimmy Carter, former President George Herbert Walker Bush, President Bush, Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, the list goes on and on.
When it came to create the modern equivalent of the Philosopher's Stone, to master alchemy at its highest level, changing one element into another, changing uranium into plutonium, one of the highest secrets of alchemy. Where did the S1 Uranium Committee of the Manhattan Project meet? Well, they of course consummated their alchemical knowledge in the Bohemian Grove. Amongst ancient trees, grown men listened to the manic laughter of Satan, wearing owl masks and black robes. It was here, at Bohemian Grove, that the consummation of thousands of years of alchemical atomic research took place. Nothing less than the birth of the bomb. American author Michael Hoffman, in his book Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare, speculates that the golem fetus may have been placed inside a giant 25-foot long, 12-foot in diameter canister, which was photographed at the Los Alamos Atomic Bomb Test Range. This mysterious canister was nicknamed Jumbo. It was made of solid lead and cement. It is conceivable that the fetus was placed in the center of the canister and then irradiated with the blast of the world's first atomic bomb, thus infusing the demon child with what Kabbalists call the demonic force of atomic fire.
You have a grandstand seat here to one of the most momentous events in the history of science. In less than a minute, you will see the most powerful explosion ever witnessed by human eyes. The blast will come out of the horizon just about there. And this is the significance of the moment. This is the first full-scale test of a hydrogen device. If the reaction goes, we're in the thermonuclear era. For the sake of all of us, and for the sake of our country, I know that you join me in wishing this expedition well.
It is now 30 seconds to zero time. Put on goggles or turn away. Do not remove goggles or face burst until 10 seconds after the first light.
Minus 15 seconds. Minus 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Two years later, Parsons revealed to his mother that his golem child had lived, and that it was female. A fan of ancient Indian mantras was the Jewish evil genius Robert Oppenheimer. His team of Manhattan Project scientists took advanced alchemy to its absolute evil limits.
Be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remember
remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, the destroyer of worlds, the destroyer of worlds."
Robert Oppenheimer and his Jewish scientists, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, named the first atomic bomb Trinity. Was this in reference to the Christian Trinity? Or is it a veiled reference to the great beast, the Scarlet Woman, and the Antichrist? Welcome to what Aleister Crowley called the Eon of Thelema. Thelema is the Greek word for willpower. This, as we shall see in the 3rd volume of the Illuminati, is the age of Thelema, where the whole of humanity is being processed, bombarded with images of death. This is the new world order.